Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey there, this is James Valvis coming at you with a new Freeform again. I say again because this is the third time I'm doing it. The first time I did it, I didn't like the results of it. I thought it was a little bit too strident, and so I decided to do another one. And I did another one, and it was about a different subject. These are always about a different subject. It's just whatever I start thinking about and talking about. And once I got done with that, I started messing around with it a little bit to make things right, and the whole computer crashed. And for some reason, I had not saved up to that point, and therefore both gone, completely gone. So I didn't get to keep the strident one, and I didn't get to keep the other one, and so I wasted about 2 hours of my day doing that. And so here I am, back at it again. Fortunately, I got up early, so I have a little extra time, but it's a bit annoying. I don't stand to gain a whole lot by doing these things. I do it because I think they're interesting. I think they might well be interesting in the future, not just for other people, but for myself. I might be able to go back and look at this as a kind of a diary of some sort, and I can listen to the stuff and see what I was thinking, maybe work in some poems out of it, or work in some essays, or maybe short fiction. Who knows? I don't know what's coming down the pike, but there's ideas in these things that I do, and in the meantime, it might help me bring a slightly larger audience, although it hasn't so far. It might in the future. Commentary tends to do better than poetry, even though in my channel it seems to be reversed. I'm doing better with the poetry than I am with the commentary, which is odd. It's odd. It just means, so partially it's because the poems are 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes long, and the commentary is 30, 40, 50 minutes long. And so people are willing to spend, 2 minutes on Jim Valvis, but not 20 minutes on Jim Valvis. Okay, that's fine. But I'm looking to advance longer, deeper ideas here in the commentary, to flesh out ideas that I do and other things, and to some degree leave a record behind of what I'm thinking about, how my thinking has evolved up to this point, what it is now, and going into the future, what it will be. But both the first one was about the relatively idiotic idea that we're being overrun with Nazis. I said I don't know a Nazi. I'm 50 years old. I've never known a Nazi. It's not like I haven't been around either. I've lived in 6 states. I don't consider it living in a state unless you've been there for at least a month. You have to be there at least a month. And then you have to be able to get out and about too. So I don't consider myself living in South Carolina, even though I spent 2 months there in basic training. I was basically at Fort Jackson, Illinois. So I consider that Army time. It's time at a time. It's not really South Carolina. It's Army. But I do consider myself having lived in Illinois, despite the fact that I was in the Army, because I got out into the public quite a bit. And to some degree Indiana as well, because even though I was in AIT, I was also out in the world a bit. And so I lived in New Jersey, I lived in Florida, I lived in Illinois, I lived in Indiana, and I've lived in Washington State, and is that it? Michigan also, and so that's 6 states, isn't it? I'm not very good at math. I believe that's 6. So, that's spread out across the country too. It's not like, I lived in New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts and that kind of thing. So it's I've been all over the country. I know what it's like to live in the Northeast. I know what it's like to live in the South East. I know what it's like to live in the Midwest. I know what it's like to live in the Pacific Northwest. I don't have the Southwest or some of the this Texas is its own kind of thing, I think, and maybe like the eastern Midwestern states, Kentucky, Tennessee, that kind of thing. So Those are the things I don't have, but I've been around. So I understand. I've met a lot of people, a lot of different kinds of people, and I've never met a Nazi, never in my life. Now I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they're pretty prominent in like a prison population. I'm sure that there are any number of people who have the teardrop tattoos and the swastikas on their arms, but I don't know those people. I've never met those people. I've been around enough to in certain situations in the South and in the hinterlands of the Pacific Northwest in the Army, that you would think that I would come across at least one or two, but these people are very rare, extremely rare people. They don't exist. The paranoia about them is absurd. There isn't any mass neo-Nazi movement in this country. Even at the height of, say, the Bund, the American Bund movement, it was still pathetically small. We're talking about a country. This is a country of 320 million people, and the KKK has. Not that the KKK and neo-Nazis are the same people, but the KKK has 5,000 members. That's one of the biggest organizations of terrorist, racist organizations the country's ever known. And it's so marginalized now that you can't even imagine the number of decimal points that would be after the, number of zeros after the decimal point in the percentage when you compare the 5,000 compared to the 320 million other Americans. These are extremely small numbers of individuals. You say, oh my God, the neo-Nazis are marching, and there's like 60 of them, and they can muster in a particular place at a time. This is, compare that to like, the Pussy March in D.C., and you see just how pathetic this, 99 times out of 100, if not 100 times out of 100, every time the Nazis or the Klan or any racist organization like that tries to march, they're always outnumbered by counter-protests. I mean, these are like, there's like 15 guys sick-hailing around and goose-stepping and any number of other people will throw them, spitting at them and throwing them the finger, and if not just outright violent toward them. And so these are completely marginalized people. They have no standing in the public. They have no standing in the intellectual community. They have no standing in academia or Hollywood. They have no standing in the culture. They have no standing in the political arena. They have no standing at all in any way, shape, or form. And yet, if you listen to the news, you would think that the Nazis are everywhere and the KKK is under every mattress, and it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. These people are, if they they don't exist, and even as they exist, they're not even troublesome, really, because look, it took 19 terrorists in 9/11 to do quite a bit of damage. So if the KKK was going around and shooting up people and blowing up pizzerias and attacking black churches or whatever, if this was a regular occurrence, it wasn't just like some lone loser here or there, like a Dylan Roof or somebody like that. If this was a common occurrence, then I'd say, yeah, we got you got a problem there. Even if you only have, a small, strident minority, even if it's only 10,000 people doing it, that 10,000 can be extremely damaging to the public. That's why Islam is so troublesome, because it doesn't take many before they're a problem, if they're radicalized. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening overall. I mean, we don't see massive amounts of black people being dragged by trucks. It's just not happening. It's not. This is not a. Once is too many, but it's not. It's not a common occurrence. This is not something that these people are doing. Mostly, they're just walking around. When they manage to pop their heads up, when they even decide to do that, what do? They walk around with tiki torches or whatever they do. It's pathetic. It's nothing. It's a pittance. You look at them and you're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, on you go. They wear the. They fly the Confederate flag over their house, and we're supposed to be horrified by this. Oh my God, the Nazis are taking over. Oh, the Confederates are back, and it's just a joke. it's a joke. It's laughable. So that was what the first one was about. It was about that. And the second one was about my daughter, which was uh, I was talking about because she's, even though she has a dual major of criminal justice and art, or at least a minor in art, she's thinking about becoming an artist, and she's now dating a guy, or at least starting to date. At least there's the possibility of dating a guy who's an artist. And I just think, boy, it's a tough row. It's tough to be an artist. It's tough to be an artist in this climate, in this life. And I don't want to go into all that I said earlier. Once I talk something out, I've talked it out, and I don't want to jump in it again right away. But basically, the idea is that there is not a great audience for art. There just isn't. If you're listening to this, you're a very rare exception of a person who's interested in an artist, any art at all. For the most part, art is it's a largely, if it's even respected, and it isn't always respected, but if it is respected, it's mostly ignored and shoveled off to the side. And people will do art, like they'll go to a museum twice a year, and they'll read a book, maybe that's not a genre garbage John Scalzi book, maybe twice a year, and that's it. It doesn't. The idea that the people want to immerse themselves in the art is something they tell themselves. It's something that they think that, they like to consider themselves appreciators or benefactors of the arts, but generally speaking, now that's not the case. There's a reason why artists struggle to make it, and artists are by nature they have a difficult time of it because it's not a necessary thing. It's not a necessary thing. Art is not necessary. You can live a perfectly fine life without ever consuming any art at all. That's not something that you hear many people say. You don't hear a lot of artists say that kind of stuff, that you don't need art. There was, art is vital. Art is you can't live with it. Oh, I would die without my art. Oh, my soul would shrivel and die. No, not really. Not really. You find out if you give up your art, you'll be fine. You'll go about and live your life just like other people live their lives. And for those people, their lives are not cheapened in any way by not experiencing the arts. Art has to. This is what a lot of artists don't understand. Art has to compete with the other things that are vying for other people's attention. They don't realize this, but you do have to compete with the Seahawks. You have to compete with gaming apps. You have to compete with Game of Thrones. I mean, Game of Thrones can be considered art in a way, but it's not really what I'm thinking about when I say art. I'm talking about, the fine arts. And so you have to compete with those people. And what you find is that it's really, really hard to compete with those other areas where eyes go on. Where it's hard to compete with those other distractions and other entertainments. And so what they do is they start to hold the audience in contempt. They start to hold the audience in disdain. Well, you're not good enough to read poetry, and so I'm going to write ever more obscure poetry just to stick it to you, and then you think and I'll just write for an ever increasingly more elitist crowd, and because you people suck. And ultimately you lose even the small audience that's even willing to pick up a poem by doing that. It's first of all, it's always going to be a small audience, but now you've made it smaller. You've made it so small that the people who practice art, the people who do art, are now outnumber the people who want to consume it. And that's not an acceptable way for art to gain any traction in the culture. It's just not going to happen. And so my daughter going into the arts, to me, is troubling. It's a problematic thing. I would much rather her be almost anything else. and I'd much rather her be interested in a guy who is interested in anything else. It's just the way I see it, and it's not. I imagine that my in-laws felt the same way about me. I've gotten a certain amount of credit for the level of success that I've achieved as an artist. It's when you've been in national anthologies and you've been in national magazines of great repute, you get a certain amount of respect out of that. But the simple fact of the matter is that I don't imagine that any parent grows up wanting their child to be married to somebody who can barely pull in $5,000 a year from what they do. That's not, unless you're like living in the really, the poorer sections of Africa. That's not exactly the greatest income possible, and yet making $5,000 a year from art is not a bad accomplishment. It's a pretty good accomplishment if you can pull that off. I know a lot of people who never make a dime from their art, and they're pretty talented authors too. They're pretty talented writers or artists, but they don't make anything. They don't sell anything. They don't sell anything that pays anything to anybody. I managed to sell enough poetry and enough literary works and enough books and enough of this or that to scrape by, to make to at least treat my family out to a dinner now and then. But it's hard, man. It's a hard road to hoe. And so for my daughter to be out there and to be interested in this kind of guy and interested in that kind of life, well, a lot of people will be like, oh, my daughter's an artist, and be running around all happy proud, and I guess it's better than being a prostitute, but it's not it's not something that I would want for her. To be a veterinarian and married to an accountant, that is a preferable life in a lot of ways, but people are going to do what they're going to do, and we live in a society where a lot of needs are already taken care of, and so it allows people to follow less practical dreams. I think that if we were struggling more as a society, that's one of the ironies of artists, is that because of capitalism and because of the great freedoms that we enjoy in America, because we've built up so much wealth out of this great system and this great human freedom that has been made possible by our constitutional republic and our capitalist system. Because of that, we've created this class of people who are so privileged that they can go out and do something that almost nobody wants to consume, and those people can complain about the very system that allows them to create work that is absolutely undesirable in any kind of context. And then if they existed in a socialist or a impoverished country, they would not only not be able to follow that for the sheer necessary need to meet one's own needs, but they would not even be allowed to do it because they would be limited in their freedom, and they would be made to produce in a way that's not amenable to the arts. So those were the two things that I talked about, and I did a better job of them. Each of those, even the one that I was unhappy with, I did a better job talking about them. But now here I am. I'm all tired out. I got nothing left, and so I'm just gonna cut it off here. And I really, I'm gonna go do the poem for tomorrow, and maybe play a couple of games, and maybe do a little writing, which I haven't done in a little while because I've been concentrating on this and suffering in the heat. And so, as always, I thank you for listening. Truly thank you, and God bless you.